5 hilarious Reddit posts you need to read. 1. The guy who downed a bottle of hot sauce at his job interview. Tofu by drinking an entire bottle of Louisiana hot sauce at a job interview in a failed attempt to be impressive. I have had a number of job interviews recently that went poorly and did not result in securing employment. I started to think I needed to do something during an interview to really stand out, be impressive, unique, and highly memorable. I thought it could be risky, but might work out. I came up with the following idea after concluding the interview. After the handshakes, etc., when leaving the room, stop, turn around, and say, "There's one more thing you need to know about me." Then pull out a bottle of hot sauce, down the entire bottle, slam it onto the ground, and say, "I can handle the heat." Not confidently, leave the room. Boom. I imagined that they would be really impressed and wowed by such a performance. Well, it didn't pan out like I thought it would. It was only a small bottle of hot sauce. I figured it would be no big deal to actually do. I should have tested at home first, but I didn't. I was nervous as a bitch ass during the interview, but I was determined to follow through with the plan. So I started exactly as described above. I was leaving. I turned around, maybe not with as much swagger as I'd imagined in my head, and I declared, "There's one more thing you need to know about me." I pulled out the hot sauce bottle, almost dropped it, and started to open the bottle. In my head it was all one quick confident motion, like an electric Indiana Jones, but instead I fumbled around and had a tough time getting it open. It felt like a nightmarish eternity, but was probably only about 20 seconds. Enough time for one of the interviewers to ask me what I was doing. I didn't answer directly. Instead, after I got the bottle open, I repeated, "There's one more thing you need to know about me," but stuttering. Then I guzzled down the entire bottle of hot sauce. I instantly regretted it. My mouth and throat felt like lava was swirling around inside me. I immediately started to gag and loudly cough. I was crying involuntarily, tears hardcore streaming down my face. I was sweating like a terrible fool. I desperately tried to scream, "I can handle the heat," but just kept coughing. Before I could get anything out, the interviewers were all standing up looking at me in horror and confusion. A few seconds before I threw up all over the floor. I knew it would happen, but I tried to hold it back. I couldn't. I threw up all over the floor. It hurt as much on the way out as it did on the way in, if not more so. The vomit felt like flaming barbed wire shredding its way through my neck. I should mention a disturbing amount of fiery mucus was also leaking out of my nose uncontrollably. After I finished throwing up, I could not bear to look at the interviewers. I hoarsely mumbled an apology and started to stumble as quickly as possible out the door. I have never been more shamed in my life. I didn't get the job. To legendary Navy officer. Late to the party, but this one is too good to pass up. I was once on a US military ship, having breakfast in the wardroom, officer's lounge, when the operations officer, Ops, walks in. This guy was the definition of not a morning person. He's still half asleep, bleary-eyed, basically a zombie with a badgel. He sits down across from me to eat his badgel, and is just barely conscious. My back is to the outboard side of the ship, and the morning sun is blazing in one of the portholes, putting a big bright ass circle of light right on his barely conscious face. He's squinting and chewing, and basically just remembering how to be alive for today. It's painful to watch. But then Zombie Ops stops chewing, slowly picks up the phone, and dials the bridge. In his well-known "I'm still totally asleep" voice, he says, "EI, it's Ops. Could you shift our barbed? Yeah, 165. Thanks," and puts the phone down. And then he just sits there, squinting, waiting, and then, ever so slowly, I realize that that big blazing spot of sun has begun to slide off the zombie's face and onto the wall behind him. After a moment it clears his face, and he blinks slowly a few times, and the brilliant beauty of what I've just witnessed begins to overwhelm me. By ordering the bridge to adjust the ship's back and forth patrol by about 15 degrees, he's changed our course just enough to reposition the sun off of his face. He's literally just redirected thousands of tons of steel and hundreds of people so that he could get the sun out of his eyes while he eats his badgel. I'm in awe. He slowly picks up his badge, and for a moment I'm terrified at the thought that his own genius may escape him, that he may never appreciate the epic brilliance of his laziness, since he's not going to wake up for another hour. But between his next bites he pauses, looks at me, and gives me the faintest sly grin, before returning to gnaw slowly on his zombie badge. 3. The guy who pretended not to know what a potato is. Tofu by enraging the parents of my girlfriend by pretending not to know what a potato is. Let me tell you that I have made a bad mistake this evening. My girlfriend, who let me tell you is only my second girlfriend of all time, said I'm invited to dinner with her and her parents. I was very aghast, nervous, and bashful to be invited to such a situation. But I knew it must be done. I met them nicely, I should tell you, and it started off in a good way. The idea slapped my mind that I should do a comic bit to make a good impression and become known to them as a person who is amusing. When I saw that baked potatoes were served, I got the idea that it would be very good if I pretended I did not know what potatoes was. That would be funny. Well, let me tell you, backfired on my face. I'll tell you how. So first, when the potato became on my plate, I acted very interesting. I showed an expression on my face so as to seem that I was confused, astounded, but in a restrained way, curious and interested. They did notice and seemed confused, but did not remark. So I asked, "This looks very interesting. What is this?" They stared at me, and the mother said, "It's a baked potato." And I was saying, "Oh, interesting, a baked, what is it again?" And she was like, "A potato." And I was like, "A potato. Oh, interesting. Never heard of a potato. Looks pretty good." And then they didn't see I was clowning, but thought I really did not know what is a potato. So I knew I would be very shamed, humiliated, depressed, and disgusted if I admitted to making a bad joke. So what I did was to act as if it was not a joke, but I committed to the act of pretending I didn't know what a potato is. They asked me, very incredulous, did I really not know what a potato is? That I never heard of a potato. I went with it and told them, yes, I did not ever even hear of a potato. Not only had I never eaten a potato, I had never heard the word potato. This went on for a bit, and my girlfriend was acting very confused and embarrassed by my loved up antics, and then the more insistent I was about not knowing what a potato is, was when the parents starting thinking I didn't know what a potato was. Well, let me tell you, I had to commit 100% at this point. When I would not admit to knowing what a potato was, the father especially began to get annoyed. At one point he said something like, "Enough is enough. You're loving with us. Admit it." And I said, "Sir, before today I never heard of a potato. I still don't know what a potato is, other than some kind of food. I don't know what to tell you." Well, let me tell you, he got very annoyed. I decided to take a bite of the potato, and when I did, I made a high-pitched noise and said, "Tastes very strange." That is when the father started yelling at me, and the mother kept saying, "What are you doing?" And my girlfriend went to some other room. Finally the father said I should get the love out of his house, and I said it was irrational to treat me like this, just because I never heard of a potato before. Well, let me tell you, he didn't take that kindly. Now in text messages I have been telling my girlfriend I really don't know what a potato is. The only way I can ever get out of this is for them to buy that I don't know what a potato is. I wish I never started it, but I can't go back. I think she will break up with me anyway. 4. Today you, tomorrow me. Just about every time I see someone I stop. I kind of got out of the habit in the last couple of years, moved to a big city and all that. My girlfriend wasn't too stoked on the practice. Then some fit happened to me that changed me, and I'm back to offering rides habitually. If you would indulge me, it is long story, and has almost nothing to do with hitchhiking other than happening on a road. This past year I have had 3 instances of car trouble. A blowout on a freeway, a bunch of blown fuses, and an out of gas situation. All of them were while driving other people's cars, which, for some reason, makes it worse on an emotional level. It makes it worse on a practical level as well, what with the fact that I carry things like a jack and extra fuses in my car, and know enough not to park facing downhill, on a steep incline with less than a gallon of fuel. Anyway, each of these times this fit happened I was disgusted with how people would not bother to help me. I spent hours on the side of the freeway waiting, watching roadside assistance vehicles blow past me, for AAA to show. The 4 gas stations I asked for a gas can had told me that they couldn't loan them out for my safety, but I could buy a really fitty 1-gallon one with no cap for $15. It was enough, each time, to make you say fit like this country is going to hell in a handbasket. But you know who came to my rescue all 3 times? Immigrants. Mexican immigrants. None of them spoke a lick of the language. But one of those dudes had a profound effect on me. He was the guy that stopped to help me with the blowout with his whole family of 6 in tow. I was on the side of the road for close to 4 hours. Big Jeep, blown rear tire, had a spare but no jack. I had signs in the windows of the car, big signs that said, need a jack and offered money. No dice. Right as I'm about to give up and just hitch out there a van pulls over and dude bounds out. He sizes the situation up and calls for his youngest daughter who speaks English. He conveys through her that he has a jack, but it is too small for the Jeep, so we will need to brace it. He produces a saw from the van and cuts a log out of a downed tree on the side of the road. We rolled it over, put his jack on top, and bam, in business. I start taking the wheel off, and, if you can believe it, I broke his tire iron. It was one of those collapsible ones, and I wasn't careful, and I snapped the head I needed clean off. Love. No worries. He runs to the van, gives it to his wife, and she is gone in a flash, down the road to buy a tire iron. She is back in 15 minutes. We finish the job with a little sweat and cussing. Stupid log was starting to give, and I'm a very happy man. We are both filthy and sweaty. The wife produces a large water jug for us to wash our hands in. I tried to put a 20 in the man's hand, but he wouldn't take it, so I instead gave it to his wife as quietly as I could. I thanked them up one side and down the other. I asked the little girl where they lived, thinking maybe I could send them a gift for being so awesome. She says they live in Mexico. They are here so mommy and daddy can pick peaches for the next few weeks. After that they are going to pick cherries then go back home. She asks if I have had lunch, and when I told her no she gave me a tamale from their cooler, the best loving tamale I have ever had. So, to clarify, a family that is undoubtedly poorer than you, me, and just about everyone else on that stretch of road, working on a seasonal basis, where time is money, took an hour or 2 out of their day to help some strange dude on the side of the road when people in tow trucks were just passing me by. Wow. But we aren't done yet. I thank them again and walk back to my car and open the foil on the tamale, cause I'm starving at this point. And what do I find inside? My loving $20 bill. I whirl around and run up to the van and the guy rolls his window down. He sees the $20 in my hand and just shaking his head no, like he won't take it. All I can think to say is poor favor, poor favor. Poor favor with my hands out. Dude just smiles, shakes his head, and, with what looked like great concentration, tried his hardest to speak to me in English. Today you, tomorrow me. Rolled up his window, drove away, his daughter waving to me in the rear view. I sat in my car eating the best loving tamale of all time and I just cried, like a little girl. It has been a rough year and nothing has broke my way. This was so out of left field I just couldn't deal. In the 5 months since I have changed a couple of tires, given a few rides to gas stations, and, once, went 50 miles out of my way to get a girl to an airport. I won't accept money. Every time I tell them the same thing, when we are through. Today you, tomorrow me. TL. Doctor, long rambling story about how the kindness of strangers, particularly folks from south of the border, force me to be more helpful on the road and in life in general. I'm sure it won't be as meaningful to anyone else, but it was seriously the highlight of my 2010. 5 edibles before dinner. Tofu by stuffing my face with edibles before dinner with my wife's parents. 40. Recently, I traveled to Denver, Colorado with my wife and my wife's parents. As a resident of a non-legalized state, and as someone who is too much of a pussy to regularly buy illegal drugs, the thing I was looking forward to most was the chance to buy fancy legal weed. What could possibly go wrong? So the first thing I do upon arriving, and after successfully ditching the in-laws, is drag my wife to a nearby dispensary for a shopping spree. And oh my god, it was just like in my dreams. Tons of different options and neat little sample jars and a team of helpful stoners walking me through the various strains. Are you looking for a mellow body high? Or do you want something that gives you a bit more pep and energy? Or are you just hoping for something light to take the stress off? Yes, yes, and yes. I reply eagerly, like a fat kid in a candy store, and request an 1/8 ounce of about 7 different options. In hindsight, if I learned anything from this experience, it is that my math and science teachers never taught me basic information, like what is an ounce, or how much weed can a person consume in a single weekend. Sure, I can tell you when 2 speeding trains leaving separate stations will collide, or a site Avogadro's number, but it turns out that none of that information is particularly relevant to getting high in a responsible and efficient manner. And it was at this dispensary that I also learned that you can't actually smoke in public places, including the hotel that my wife and I were staying at. As a result, before leaving, I begged my wife to buy some edibles that I could munch on until we found a place to properly get lit. After expressing shock as to the absurd volume of drugs that we were buying, unlike me, she is the product of private school and understands the imperial measurement system. She relents, and we walk out of the store with what felt like a dump truck of weed plus a small package of seemingly innocuous ginger snap cookies. When we finally get back to the hotel room, I tear those bad boys open, only to find about a dozen tiny cookies roughly the size of a quarter. What the love, Denver? Seeing the skepticism and hunger in my eyes, my wife warns me that I should go easy and look at the back of the package first before trying one. Dose size: 1/2 cookie. I read silently as I start taking micro bites from the edges, like a giant chinchilla gnawing on a sunflower seed. But what kind of a savage only eats half a cookie? So a second later, I covertly pop the remainder into my mouth. And then I quickly stuff another 2 cookies in my mouth for good measure the moment my wife turns her back. We may not have legal weed back home, but I routinely devour an entire package of Millinus in one sitting without breaking a sweat. Your move, tiny ginger snaps. About 30 minutes later we are in the backseat of her parents' rental car on the way to dinner. And that's when things start to go tits up. My stomach growls loudly and angrily. My wife looks at me with inquisitive eyes that seem to say diarrhea. But I merely clutch my tummy and mumble something about altitude sickness. You didn't eat a whole cookie, did you? She asks, 10% in genuine concern and 90% in seething irritation. Of course not, I respond, avoiding eye contact for the remainder of the car ride. A few minutes later we are climbing out of her parents' rental car and heading into some trendy farm 2-table restaurant. I don't remember how I made it to my seat, and I don't remember even looking at the menu, but I do remember the concerned look on the waiter's face as he asked me if I was doing alright. Keep it together, man, I say to myself. But my wife's sudden groan suggests that I may have also said that to the waiter. Things are going downhill fast. The waiter nods sympathetically, takes our orders, and then heads to the next table. The moment he walks away, my wife is staring daggers at me. I start to worry that the jig is up. You are sweating from your entire face, she says with both pity and disgust. Not quite knowing what to do, I reach for my napkin and proceed to blot my cheeks, nose, neck, chin, and forehead. At this point, my wife's mom looks over at me with some concern. Are you alright? She asks kindly. Yeah, the food's just a bit spicy, I reply, far too quick to realize that we had literally just ordered and that there is nothing on the table except for a basket of dinner rolls. My wife kicks me under the table to grab my attention. Bathroom. Now, she hisses. Get it together. I reluctantly get up from the table and head for the toilet. After splashing several handfuls of water on my face, I approach a urinal and start to pee. Now, one of the more disconcerting effects of those tiny ginger snap monsters is the feeling that time has become untethered from reality. As I'm peeing, I start to get the very unsettling feeling that I have been taking a piss for the better part of an hour, and that my wife must be pacing around the restaurant worried about me. But deep down I know that is absurd. I've been peeing all my life, sometimes multiple times a day. I've probably taken more than 50,000 leaks, and it usually only takes about a minute at most. So given that my typical pee is no more than 60 seconds, and given that it feels like I'm about halfway done, that means that I've probably only been standing here about 30 seconds, right? But the guy at the urinal next to me doesn't respond, and instead starts shuffling away from me midstream, like a startled penguin. I try, albeit unsuccessfully, to break eye contact. After finally finishing, I again splash some water on my face and return to my seat, making sure to apologize to the table for being gone such a long time just in case my math was off. Next, I try briefly to engage in small talk with my wife's father, but I'm far too high to understand what either of us are saying. Not wanting to start laughing uncontrollably at the wrong moment, or, really, at any moment, I figure the safest idea is to nod my head periodically and drink a ton of water. Nothing cures mental fatigue like water, right? To my wife's horror, I stand up, grab my water glass and thrust it out to the waiter, who unfortunately is on the opposite side of the restaurant. But he turns out to be really cool, and, after making his way over to our table, tells me that he'll do his best to keep me stocked with ice water for the rest of the meal. He also helpfully suggests that, if the dinner rolls aren't too spicy for me, I should probably eat one or two so that I'm not sitting there on an empty stomach. Smart man. However, after going through all of the bread on the table and 3 glasses of water, I start to get worried that I need actual food to offset the growing paranoia from those tiny ginger snap devils. Do you think I should flag down the waiter again and ask what's taking so long? I suggest helpfully to my wife. What? We literally just ordered 3 loving minutes ago. And at that exchange, my wife loses her cool. How many cookies did you eat? She demands. Whoa, easy there, Torquemada. I respond, somewhat horrified at her outburst. I had a few cookies, but keep it down. I don't want your parents to know how loveyed up I'm right now. Really? They are sitting 2 feet away from you. They know. I look up, and for the first time notice both of my in-laws just staring at me for what literally felt like an eternity. TL. Doctor, ate way too many edibles on a trip, and wigged out during a dinner with my wife and her parents. Edit. Wow. Thanks everyone for all the love, and for even some of the hate. I think I have officially peaked in life. As for part 2 of the story, there's a reason, or, technically, 3 delicious reasons, why it was cut short. At that point, my wife's singular focus was on getting me out of the restaurant, before I either puked all over the table or pissed myself, or an unsightly combination of both. So after a few spastic 2-handed waves goodbye to my in-laws, she rushed me to the door like a Secret Service agent evacuating the president. My night after that was a whirlwind of barfing and groveling, mixed with a few vain attempts at getting handsy back in the hotel room. But being the absolute awesome sweetie that she is, my wife stuck with me through the whole nightmare, whispering over and over in my ear, please don't die, we have a mortgage. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more daily videos.